I'm really impressed. Everybody's been doing some really interesting stuff, and I'm impressed with how professional people are. A lot of the times, if you're missing a couple points, I'll say why, and when people see that and they want clarification, they'll email me, and I'm able to clear it up. And then I've had people turn around with re-edited stuff just in a couple minutes. And two of the most common things that I've noticed is on the project specifically, people are not alphabetizing the citations, which takes just a couple minutes to do. And I want to iterate, and I've already told several people too. And I think maybe a couple people even here tonight. But when you do a works cited page at the end of your video or your PowerPoint video, whatever it is, if things need to be edited, like if they need to be alphabetized or if they need the accessed on date at the end or whatever, do not redo your video. Just make a separate document that has the citations in the correct format, correct order. And I think, Lindsay, I think you and Cassandra both, you guys, when you submitted your video, you submitted a document at the same time that had those laid out. And that was great because then I think it makes it a lot easier to edit. But when anybody does resubmit, if you're going to resubmit more than one file, please make sure that you resubmit it, all the files at the same time, because Canvas will overwrite any previous submissions. And I've had this in one of my classes. They needed to have an image file, and then they also needed to have a document file. And the person sent the image file without the document file, and I asked them to send both things. So they sent the document file and erased the image file. And then finally, on the third iteration, they sent both of them at the same time, and that works. But the reason why I have you resend it is that that way you and the university have a permanent record of your submission. And so it's not extra make work or anything like that. It is specifically so that you guys have records of your submissions that are on file permanently with the university. So that's what that is about. Well, I want to try this really quick, and please let me know if the video, if the sound plays. Can you guys hear that?
Yes, that's working.
Okay, all right. Okay, before we get into that, Lindsay, how was your weekend?
It was good. My friends and I went to Moab and just hung out for the weekend, did some hiking. And
Moab is absolutely beautiful. I did a window set for a place in Professor Valley, which is right along the river there. And they live about 2 miles back from the river. And so the window set is looking towards the river and pretending that you can see it. But that just beautiful area around there.
oh yeah, it's so cool to like see the change in landscape as you're driving through Utah. It's so diverse.
Yeah, going from I-15 to Moab, it's like you're traveling all the way around the world.
It kind of is, yeah.
It is pretty amazing. Excellent. What did you do, Cassandra?
I mainly just did homework because I had a lot of it.
Oh, that's totally valid. I think that's a great way of using stuff, especially if you have family that's begging you to do chores. You say, "Oh, well, I'm on a time-sensitive thing and I just have to do my homework. I'm sorry I can't do the chores," which works really well.
No. I'd rather just do both and not put anyone else in that position to have dirty room.
No, it's doing the homework over the weekend is kind of like peeling off a scab. I think it's not too comfortable when you're doing it, but when you're done, it's a relief. So good job on that. How about you, Zach? What were you able to do?
I did homework as well and worked and tried to do some Halloween stuff with my daughter, carving pumpkins and stuff.
Well, that is so much fun. That reminds me, I found out about the St. George ghost tour right in downtown St. George. You meet at the jail that's behind George's restaurant and in front of Benja's restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a 2-hour walk around downtown. You see the historical buildings and neighborhoods in that area. That was a lot of fun. And there are 2 spots where the guy tries to scare you a little bit, but it's like a grandpa telling ghost campfire stories, so it's not a big deal. How old is your daughter, if you don't mind me asking?
She's 5.
5?
Yeah.
And this would probably not be so much for her, but it is a fun thing.
Yeah, anything, and that she's scared of laser tags, so I wouldn't take her to do zombies or a haunted house or anything yet.
No, that's wise. Very good. My kids, I was such a bad, horrible father. One of my daughters, her favorite movies are Gladiator and Sweeney Todd. And I watched those with her when she was really young. I remember coming into Sunday school after the Hellboy movie came out. And one of the Sunday school teachers said, "Oh, so what did you do over the weekend?" She said, "Well, last night my dad took me to watch Hellboy." And this lady gave me the stink eye, and said, "And little girl, what did you learn watching Hellboy?" And she said, and I'm still very grateful to her. She said, "It doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from. The things that matter are the people that you care about and how you behave." I thought that,
Kids are cool.
yeah, that is awesome. And there was no coaching,
Yeah.
coaching ahead of time. So
Yeah, they're still genuine. Mm.
well, I'm glad you guys had productive weekend. And as we move forward, remember, I reminded everybody too that I took off the 6th project, so that people could work on their final project. And I need everybody, as soon as they can, to turn in the final project proposal. And hold on just a second here. Okay, so bless you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, what I'm doing right now before we go on to this is I will be cutting off the 5th research or discovery project. We are not going to be doing that anymore. What I will be doing instead is I will show you guys more next week, but I have a AI project that I want to share with you. And this is not what it's going to be. This is the one I'm showing you is an example that I did for a completely different class. And this is something that we're going to be doing. I will tell you about it next week. And the whole thing should take about 1.5 to 2 hours at the most. But let me show this to you, and then we'll go back to our regular scheduled class. This is for my 1010 class. And for you guys, it's going to be a little bit more structured. But what you're going to be doing essentially is finding examples of one of the periods that we discussed. And figuring out several different indicators and source images. So like you're going to be, again, this is the one I'm showing you is not what the actual assignment is. I'm going to roll that out and show people that next week. But what you are going to be doing is, if you like, for example, Carolingian architecture, or if you like, for example, Etruscan art, you're going to find 5 source images of that, and you're going to be able to articulate some of the elements that you feel are important to it. Like, for example, architecture in Mali uses Adobe. as an important textural component. Or the principal colors are going to be warm colors, natural colors like wood and mud, dried mud, different things like that. You're going to be talking about, so you're going to be having a selection of source images and a selection of things that are textural identifiers for whatever it is. And then you're going to work with AI to generate a prompt. And you can ask AI, okay, this is what the assignment is. Can you help me generate a prompt to do this? I want to create an image of something completely new that's never been seen before, but I want you to follow these source images I've uploaded and use these textural indicators, recurring patterns, shapes, materials, stuff like that, that are indicative of this particular style. And I want you, AI, to help me generate a prompt to create a visual image of a completely new art piece that fits in this, that looks visually like it fits in this time period and is consistent with these source images that I pulled from the internet. And then what you'll do, so does everybody understand that? So you're working with AI to create a prompt to develop the visual image. And then once you get the visual image, what you're going to do is do your critique, using the 4 tools of critique: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And in your evaluation, you're going to determine and say, does this look consistent? With all the styles that I've seen that are indicative of this particular period of art, does this look consistent? And then you'll determine whether or not it's effective, whether or not it's successful. You're going to go back to your prompt, revise it so that you can make it better somehow, whatever that means to you. You're just going to revise the prompt somehow. And that may be, I'm going to find a couple more source images to put in. Would you please, look at the textual components of this and pay more attention to these images. Then you're going to take that new visual image that the AI then generates, run through Feldman's model again, and determine whether or not this is more or less effective than your first one. And then and you'll turn that whole thing in. And you can turn that in either as a video presentation or as a written document. So again, this is not the assignment I'm going to share with you. This is all about Molly. This is for my Art 1010 class. What you are going to be doing is using AI to help you generate a completely new image of ancient architecture, ancient painting, something like that, consistent with the style of art that we've already seen. And it may be something like, I've never seen people playing board games in an Egyptian tomb painting. So here's some 5 images of Egyptian tomb paintings, standard things. Please generate a new image using these colors and these styles with this apparent age, but having them play an Egyptian style of Monopoly or something. And see what that comes up. Then you're going to use Feldman's model to critique it, and then revise the prompt, have it generate another image, and determine whether or not that is more or less successful. And like I said, you will either put this together in a document or in a video. And you show the images on your screen while you talk about it. So you can do either one. Does that sound like it would be something that you guys, and we'll go, and I'll finish writing this up, and we will do it, and we'll talk about it on next Tuesday. But I want to do this rather than another research project and another discovery project. So everybody just stops with the 4 projects. We'll do an AI project, and then you'll do the final 10-hour project. What do you think about that?
I think it sounds like fun.
Could we do either or? Would that be an option? Or do you just want to stick with the AI thing?
I think I want to do the AI thing, but if you do not have access to it and you feel a moral compulsion away from it, then you'll have to let me know. But I'm trying this out to see if it's successful. And if it is successful, I will add it as one of the project options for next semester. So in order to get a broad enough sample so we can tell whether or not it's truly successful, I do need everybody who possibly can to be involved with it. And if I make it an option, I'm not going to get the numbers that I need.
That's valid.
So the only way out of it is if you absolutely do not have access to AI image generating software.
But you said possibly through the school, us being enrolled, that we would have
Yes.
access to it.
Yeah, as part of your student enrollment package, everybody does have access to it.
And would you, when you write the assignment, be able to possibly share a link or how Microsoft or what we can use as students, or should we take that up with the library people that help?
I'm thinking the library would know best. But I will I'll put down, I'll see what I could do about finding who to talk to about that. The online teaching office here on campus, they know what some of those resources are, so I will communicate with them, and if I can find those links, all of them, I will put them in the assignment. But yeah, so everybody should have access to a free image generating AI software, and I will find those links for you so that you can do it.
Thank you.
So because it is free, that means that I am not expecting Star Wars digital animation level stuff. I'm just expecting, and I wanted to see if I could find, can you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I am trying to find where I put all this because I wanted to show you what I had generated, the sample of what I generated. And I am having a difficult time finding that. Let's see. Give me just a second here. Ah, okay, I know where it is. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is what I have put together. Kind of talking about it a little bit. And this is specifically for that ART 1010 assignment. And then these are the two images that I generated. Can you guys see both of these images?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the first image, and then with a little bit of revision, this is the second image. And you do not have to, the assignment part, a big part of the assignment is not getting frustrated. It's just seeing what happens when you do two different images. And if the first one is absolutely perfect and the second one looks dumb, that's fine. It still needs to be two images. You know, and then you talk about the first one was a lot more successful than the second one. But that's basically what we're doing. And I did all this, actually, I did all this in about 35 minutes. So it really doesn't take very long.
It would be cool to use this as a tool for painting or photography ideas, or to learn how to, because you could say, I want a cat shooting a machine gun in Egyptian tablets or whatever in the time period and see what
Oh,
they
so it's
quote.
consistent with this now. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And it's what I use AI for the most part, is generating ideas. And I think that is one of the best things to do. I use it as my rough draft generator, and I also use it to as an outline tool. You know, if when I'm doing writing and stuff like that. And then I will, after I do the outline, I will put in what I've written, and I ask it to look for problems too. And I think AI is one of those things where it's not going to go anywhere. And if we deny it, we're going to, AI isn't going to take anybody's jobs. The people that are going to lose jobs are the people that don't understand what AI is, should properly be used for. And I think that the biggest problem that we have today in an education environment is people do not understand what AI is used for. We don't use it to keep ourselves from thinking. We use it as a tool to help shorten the time that we might have to spend otherwise, you know, to help us to understand things better. And so when in my classes where I require essays and stuff like that, when people write them with AI, I don't really care about the essays. I'm not looking for anything that AI can be used for to help you write your essays. What I'm looking for is that the essays are evidence of your thought process. So the deliverable is actually evidence of a thought process, not the finished essay. And I think that's a lot of the times the stuff that you see advertised for note taking and things like that, they market it towards you with the assumption that teachers want the essays. I don't know of any teacher that wants essays. What they want is for students to demonstrate their critical thinking abilities through the tool of the essay. So anyway, something to think about. But thank you guys. Thank you for that input. I will get that ready for next week. And you should already see in your Canvas that the 5th project is taken off. And I will put that on, and I would really need people's feedback on that as much as possible. So anyway, did I show you guys this video last week?
I don't
not
you showed us
snow.
something similar before, if not that. I don't know if it was last week or a different time.
It was the
Okay.
Nine Inch Nails song. Yes.
Okay. Then let me show you a different one then. If I can. My computer is acting funny now. This is great. Okay. I'm going to share this with you. And this kind of stuff, it is kind of fun. It is kind of silly, but I'll explain why I'm doing it in just a little bit. So listen to this for just a bit.
I know thou wantest me to stay. I cannot deny these maddening visions of me in Calais. And I heard there is a wondrous place whereupon can be a queen every blessed day.
Okay, we're not going to listen to the whole thing, but the reason I'm sharing this with you is because we are looking at time periods that are very different from our own. And what can be a little bit frustrating about this is, like last week, we talked about how the Dark Ages, the people that came up with that name were people living in the Enlightenment era that wanted to differentiate between the fall of the Roman Empire, which was supposed to be all that, and the beginning of the Renaissance. And they completely dismissed 1,000 years of effort in between those two periods with the simple phrase, the Dark Ages. And, you know, claiming that there was not really, or teaching with the implication that nothing of worth was created during that time period. And we did talk last week quite a bit about Carolingian stuff, introduce a little bit of the Merovingian work. And I want to just, we have a lot of material to get through this week. And I want to show some of it. Some of it is going to be stuff that we've already looked at before, like Byzantine and everything like that. But have any of you ever seen the Bayeux tapestry?
Yes.
Okay, or just images of it online. But what makes this so important is that this tapestry, the reason why it's so valuable is that the stylization that was used in this is something that everybody uses now. Everybody uses it in film and other contexts as a symbol for the time period between about the 7th century and the end of the Crusades. And so what we're looking at, some of the things that we can see is we have solid colors, we have identifiably human figures, but they are kind of distorted. They're not staying in very naturalistic poses, not all of them. This guy, I think, is, these two. This person is leaning back a little bit too far. The sizes are off, comparing actually the ratio of the human size to the horse size is pretty close. The horses that carried people into battle had to be really sturdy, and they did have a lower center of gravity, so they were pretty short a lot of the time. But you do see size distortion, like this ship, which appears to be right next on the same plane as these riders and the horses. There's way too many people crammed into that little tiny ship. And these people seem really small. And we saw that before when we were looking at the standard of it's called the hierarchy of size is what it refers to, or it's also social perspective is what it's called. When the people that are quote unquote more important are valid in a social hierarchy are shown to be taller or larger than the people that aren't as valid in a social hierarchy. But the faces, if we look at some of these, if we get up to the face, you can see that the faces, they remind me an awful lot of some of those simple faces we saw in the book illuminations, the book paintings that we looked at. And you can see, here's a better image of the faces. So, relatively simple figures, things like that. This is some of these, they have mystical animals, which kind of inform our take on mystical animals. And so the reason why the Bayeux tapestry is so important is that first, it survived from this time period. And this is smack dab in the middle of the time period we're talking about, 11th century. So this is right about the time of the First Crusade. And this also is an illustration of historical events. And it gives us a little bit of an indication of what people's costuming looked like, what kind of clothes they wore, what kind of hats they wore. The reality is that most of the people on a battlefield did not have proper armor. If they were lucky, they had a shield. If they were lucky, they had an actual weapon rather than a farming implement that was adapted for weapons use. There's the people that, the government didn't outfit anybody. People had to get their own armor and materials. And that's why knights were so rare, because they usually did have a sponsor that helped them with either the fabrication of or the paying for some of their equipment. And so that's a couple reasons why this is so important, is because it really defines how we perceive the Middle Ages, because of the way animals and people are depicted, because of mystical events and different things of that nature. Now, this is a really interesting plaque. This plaque is a little bit more, it has that same kind of similar level of artistry as that plaque we saw last week. That was from the end of Rome. This is an ivory plaque. I believe it's about maybe 6 inches tall, 10, 12 inches wide. And this is done about 500 years after that other plaque that we saw that was almost photorealistic. Now, if we look at this, I hope you guys can tell what the story is. First off, this kind of indicator with a really complicated circle in the sky, and then again with the halo right there. With that, what do you think this shape indicates?
God.
It's like a portal from heaven, and he's coming
Yeah.
to save them.
It's a portal into heaven. Exactly. And this, I don't know if you can tell what this story is, but the 5 people represented right here is actually 3 different images of the one person and 2 different images of the other person. So here's one person. Okay, here's the portal into heaven, like what Lindsay said, hand reaching out. One person is offering up a sheaf of grain. The other person is offering up a lamb. And which the lamb or the sheaf of grain is the hand reaching for?
The lamb.
The lamb. That's right. So if the hand of God is reaching towards the lamb, and you have 2 different people both offering up, one offering grain, the other offering a lamb, what is this the story of? Who is this guy? He's Cain. Who is this guy?
Peter and Paul.
This one is Abel. It's the story of Cain and Abel from the Old Testament. Are you guys familiar with this?
Not really.
It has been a while
Okay.
since I brushed up on my scripture.
Okay. All right. The story of Cain and Abel is that Cain was the oldest son of Adam and Eve. Abel was his younger brother. So the first 2 males that were offspring of Adam and Eve. And they were taught to sacrifice from their own production to God. So Cain was a farmer. He offered up grain. Abel was a shepherd, and he offered up a lamb. And God accepted the lamb, and Cain was really upset that the grain was not accepted. And so as the story progresses, Lucifer, or the serpent, told Cain to get rid of his brother, so God only had to deal with him. And then that was a way to get over his shame. So Cain killed his brother Abel, and he became the first murderer. And then this shows God reaching down from heaven, and notice that this figure is shying away, trying to escape. This is God asking Cain, where did your brother go? What did you do? Oh no, you killed him. I will mark you so nobody wants to be your friend. And so this person, and this person are all the same figure. They're all Cain. This person with the lamb and this person are both Abel. And these figures, like I said, are about 3.5, 4 inches tall. Okay, so I want you guys to think about that for just a little bit. So this is a 1,000-year-old carving. Look at the detail of that. The detail in the clothing, the detail in this halo, and like Lindsay said, the portal right here. And there are some things that I want you to notice too. The figure, the gesturing is exaggerated quite a bit. The hands seem to be pretty big. You know, the hands that are reaching out seem to be pretty big. The features seem to be pretty simple, but I think we can tell right here that he is not very happy, and a lot of that is the posture of his body. But considering that this is in the time smack dab in the middle of the Dark Ages, where nobody's supposed to be able to be smart enough to do anything like this, I think it is pretty remarkable how detailed and beautiful this is, especially this patterning that's surrounding God and on their legs. I think that is really amazing. But do you guys see the story now?
Yeah, I do.
So we're looking at a time period where a lot of the times people do not have access to stable areas where they can do their artwork in peace. They don't have access to constant supply of materials, a constant supply of high quality tools. They do the best that they can. And I think that's important to know, because it seems like to me on this piece that the importance, or the places where the artists spent a lot of time working on it, were things that either illustrated their own expertise, or more importantly than that, they were things that were vital to the understanding of the story. Because these figures, for all intents and purposes, are identical, in this left-hand section of the panel. And the only reason we know that this is Cain is because of his behavior. And we know what the story is. So not an awful lot of detail on the figure, but you do notice that Cain and Abel do not have beards. God does have a beard. So I just think that that's really interesting. So definitely there's some more Byzantine ivories here. We have a lot of things that I want to look at, instead of talking about that too much, but definitely look at those Byzantine ivories and watch that video on the Middle Ages. During this time period, one of the important things we got to recognize is that in Europe at this time, people were dealing very much with something called feudalism. And this is where the ruling people, the ruling personnel, had access to land. They're the only ones that really had ownership in land. And everybody else, the options that you had were to serve in the church as a nun or a priest, to function as somebody to carry out the will of the rulers, to be a merchant where you're traveling around and selling your wares, or basically to be a farmer. And the farmers aren't even going to own their own lands. They're going to be farming for somebody else. And for a lot of this time period, unless you were lucky, and I'm saying that in kind of air finger quotes, unless you were lucky enough to go on crusade, you probably lived and died within maybe a day's walk of your local church. So, something to think about. And I want to watch this. Let's see. This is about 2 minutes. I think this kind of gives you an overview of this kind of stuff. Can everybody see this video?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's only about 2 minutes long. I want to watch it. Primarily what we're interested in is early Christian, migration, Byzantine. Because that gets us up to, and early Gothic, that gets us up to about 1350. We are going to be looking at some other stuff too, but this is the time period that we're looking at. So it does overlap quite a bit of the Carolingian and Merovingian stuff we saw last week. Okay, that's about what I wanted to share with you guys. that music that we're listening to is reconstruction of what people think music might have sounded like at this time. So we're talking about very simple melody lines. We're talking about something that's a very relatively simple harmony, if there is one. Engaging percussion on very simple instruments, simple drums, maybe a bell or cymbal of some sort. But it's relatively simple is not intended as a pejorative term whatsoever, but the structure of the music at the time they think is a lot less complicated than even a couple hundred years later. And there's a couple reasons for this. One of the ways that people actually got news at this time in Europe and North Africa and the Middle East is because of travelers that would memorize the news in the form of songs. And they would use these songs to entertain people, and that's how they made their living. This is where we get ideas like the bards, the traveling minstrel, things like that. A lot of the music instruments had to be small enough that they were easy to carry. And what's really, and there are some really fascinating things about how that impacted music in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, in this whole area. So if you think about that, in a musical traveler, one of these bard musicians, they probably travel by themselves. If they travel with somebody else, it's going to be somebody, just like one or two people at the most. But it's a lot easier that way for them to join caravans, for them to join groups of travelers that are moving from one place to another. And as all part of that, all their baggage they have to be able to carry on, with themselves as they're walking. So they're not going to have big instruments. If they carry a harp, it's probably going to be more like a lyre, just a really tiny one. Or if they carry any other stringed instrument, it's going to be like an early version of the lute. And if they do have drums, cymbals, anything like that, you can imagine it has to be light enough that they carry it with them with all their other possessions. So that's just a little bit about the music at the time. But we're looking at 4 things specifically. And 3 of them we've already touched on. So we're going to go through them very quickly. But then I want to talk about the Vikings, the Viking art a little bit. And we haven't really seen that. Now, we have talked about Byzantine art. And a number of you have done some really interesting work on your projects with the mosaics and everything. Really good. Muslim work. This is pretty astounding things. Definitely watch these videos. Carolingian, we talked about that a little bit. One thing we have not hit on is the Vikings. And I do recommend that you watch this. We're not going to look at it right now. We're going to move on with other stuff, and then we're going to touch on the Vikings. Now, we did look, the Byzantine art that we looked at spans over 1,000 years. From when Constantine went to Turkey, set up his empire there, and his empire of Rome lasted about twice as long as Rome did in the West. And I think, some of the things that we see about this is that the figures are really tall. The eyes seem really, really big. This is where it's a really strong convention to have the halos in it. And there's some other really beautiful elements about this. And out of all these things, I did want to look at, definitely watch this, the painting demonstration. But I want to see this. I want to see how long this is. Okay, this may be too long. So I definitely watch this. We're not going to watch the whole thing in the class. But this is Byzantine sculpture. And we didn't look at a lot of sculpture, but I want you guys to look at this a bit. What is one thing that you notice immediately that is very different from this Byzantine sculpture than from the Byzantine mosaics we were looking at? Can everybody see this marble statue of a Byzantine woman?
Seems to be more realistic,
Yes.
actual proportions.
Yeah, the proportions, they aren't those distorted, unearthly proportions. I think you're absolutely right. I don't know exactly why that is, but my suspicion would be is primarily because they're doing different things with different media. You know, the media of this is stone. And they probably learned from other stone carvers who learned from earlier Roman and Greek stonemasons and stone sculptors. But I also think that this is going to be in a different setting. This is something that is going to be relatively portable. It's not going to be easily portable, but it's going to be portable. Whereas the mosaics, they're stuck on a wall and that's it. So what is interesting to me is that you look at some of these Byzantine sculptures, and they are like Zach said, the proportions are a lot closer to ordinary, regular human proportions. What is interesting, though, is as you move a little bit forward in time, and they start using these sculptures to decorate the exteriors of churches, they start elongating and having the same proportions as the earlier Byzantine mosaics, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, it seems very realistic to me. That's kind of wild. And we're gonna look just a little bit of the painting demo. I want you to watch this whole thing. It's a couple minutes long, but this person is an icon painter who is demonstrating how to do an icon painting in that same style of Byzantine painting that we saw earlier. You know, same kind of figurative work and everything like that. So definitely take a moment and look at this video. It's about 3 minutes long. But then I did want to look at this. This is Byzantine architecture. We touched on it briefly. We didn't really talk about it. This is about a 5-minute video. Let's see. I'm thinking we may just look at some of the buildings and talk about them as opposed to watch the whole video. And before we get into that, I do want to show this right here. Okay, remember the 4 things that we're talking about is Byzantine work, Carolingian, Muslim, and Viking. Viking is not something we've talked about before. We've talked about the other 3. All this, we're overlapping significantly within the time periods. Now, Vikings at this time, they were up in this way. Can you guys all see this map?
Yes.
Of Europe?
Yeah.
Okay. Vikings predominantly were in this area and in this area. So, you know, Northern Europe and along the coast here. Then we also, and up branching even further into the North Atlantic and over to Greenland. What is fascinating though, do you see this Danube, the Danube River going up here? What is interesting is that the Vikings found that river, used it for passage down here, and they were actually hired as bodyguards by a lot of the cultures in this area right here. And this is where the overlap comes. So we have Carolingians that they kind of define Europe as a cohesive mass, just like the Qin did for the different cultures of China. We have the Byzantines that were right over here in this area, and they governed a lot of this area right through here. We have Muslims where you go to Syria, south and east of this way, into northern Egypt and along a lot of North Africa and even into Spain. So we get Muslims in this area, Byzantines in this area, Carolingians in this area, and then you have the Vikings in this area right over here. What is so fascinating about this is a lot of what we know about Viking history and Viking folklore and Viking processes, you know, cultural processes, comes actually from Arabic or Muslim and Constantinian observers. You know, the whole idea of the burial at sea where you light the ship on fire and everything like that, that was actually first recorded by a Muslim historian because of the things that he witnessed working with Viking bodyguards. because the Constantinians, or the early Turks right here, and Muslims around here, Carolingians as well, they would hire Vikings as bodyguards. So we get a lot of cultural cross-pollination. Anyways, so I just think stuff like that is really fascinating. So that's why that part of the video is important. But do you remember when we talked about Byzantine architecture? What are some of the hallmarks of Byzantine architecture that you can see in this particular image?
We got our domes and the way that they are distributing the weight of the building.
Excellent. Excellent. Oh, man, I wish you were right here, Lindsay, because I would staple a gold star right to the middle of your forehead. Excellent. Any other hallmarks? Excellent, Lindsay. That is great. Any other hallmarks? The slope of the roof, and we get those Roman arches right in a lot of these windows. So that is excellent. Way to pick that out. What I love about this video is it goes quite a bit more into this, and it even talks about how the layout of cathedrals are based on Byzantine and then later Carolingian architecture. And you can see this is a drawing of a standard Byzantine style church. Just like Lindsay said, you have the large central dome area with the cascading buildings to take the weight. We have the slopes of the roof, and we have those Roman style arches. And there's lots of variations of this kind of thing. And this talks about distributing the weight with barrel vaults and these kinds of central dome constructions. So definitely check this out. Check this video out. This is a smaller church, but it's very much Byzantine again. You have that large central dome right up there. Notice it has 8 sides. You have the 22.5-degree slope of the roof. You have large with smaller buildings cascading down, taking the weight. You have Roman style arches, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And that is pretty consistent. We have some more. This is, I believe that this is a combination of mosaic and fresco, but it's a similar style to the other stuff that we saw that I hope you guys can see. And I refer to this as the old man angry Jesus. He looks like Saruman from the Two Towers, I think, a little bit. So that's just a really, really rapid overview of the Byzantine stuff. When you look at the Muslim stuff, I really want you to watch this video. It just talks a little bit about Islamic art in about 5-6 minutes, around there. And these are really good to look at as well. We talked about the importance of the Quran, and this is gold leaf calligraphy. Really amazing stuff. And for anybody that is interested in Islamic patterning, I am more than happy to show people how to do this kind of stuff. If you guys are interested, a couple of you we could figure out a time. I could record my interaction and show you what I'm doing, and everybody could see how to make some of these designs. And there are some pretty fascinating stuff, and there are rules that need to be followed to make it look specifically Muslim, these designs. And I was working on glass for the Chicago LDS Temple a while ago, and it was really frustrating me because people were trying to use some of this style. It's called sacred geometry, where you're making designs for specifically a spiritual setting using very specific geometry and ratios. And what frustrated me is that it looked like the person was plugging stuff in, the designer was plugging stuff in to a design program without any understanding of what was going on. And if you guys want to learn about this kind of art, I would be more than happy to talk about that and explain why some of the, if you're going to be looking at sacred geometry, looking at the Islamic artwork, it's really important not just to think that you've got the designs down, but to understand what the designs mean, and how they relate to each other. So this is a really good video that shows a lot of this kind of work, the tile work, the sacred geometry style work and things like that. So definitely check that video out. And then this is a rather solid exploration of the Dome of the Rock. And this is about 5.5 minutes long. So this is really good too. And what I like about this person, this is an art historian, and she shows how Islamic architecture impacted the architectural design of Europe itself. And again, we're all talking about the same kind of time period. This is 7th to 12th century, right around there. 7th to 11th century. And I know that we've talked about it quite a bit before. And then this is the same video we watched last week, I believe, or looked at. I don't think we watched the whole thing. Merovingian and Carolingian art. And this talks about Charlemagne. And I don't think we looked at this thing. And I do want to show this. Do you guys remember what the relationship of Merovingian to Carolingian is? Do you guys remember that from last week?
No.
Okay, the Merovingian, there was the French dynasty right between the fall of Rome and the beginning of the Carolingians, or Charlemagne, or Chucky the Great. The Merovingians, their claim to royal authority comes from a legend that the very pregnant Mary Magdalene was brought to the southern shores of France by Joseph of Arimathea. And her offspring were the predecessors of the Merovingian line of kings in France. And so there's an implication that, since this is one of the first generation of Christians and it's her child, the hint was that it was Jesus's baby. And that's what Merovingians kind of used to help underscore their authority. And of course, I'm talking about the southern coast of France, right around here. And the Merovingians, they tried to bring things together a little bit, but it wasn't until about the 6th, 7th century that Charlemagne was born. He came online, and he was the guy that was able to bail out Italy, save their butts basically, and have the church, the Catholic Church, declare him the Holy Roman Emperor of Europe. And then Charlemagne was the one that united all of Europe in the same way that Emperor Qin united all of China. So that's, and his validity came from the fact that he kept telling people he had Merovingian blood in him. So he came from the Merovingian line of kings. Right? Does everybody follow that kind of? Mary Magdalene landing here, her child started the Merovingian dynasty, and Charlemagne, or the Carolingians, grew out of the Merovingian dynasty and united all of Europe. Everybody got that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that's how that all gets together. And I know I'm going through this really quick, but I wanted to get to this point where we talk about the Vikings. So as we look at this, the Byzantine Empire, they covered a lot of Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, Turkey. Their seat was right here in Constantinople. And they were the guys that were kind of the buffer between the Muslims and the Carolingians / Merovingians, Europe, basically. So, and all four of these groups are living together at about the same time, and they do a lot of cross-pollinating. But you have, at this time, you have the Fatimid Caliphate in North Africa, the Abbasids in the Middle East. So you have the Muslims basically to the south and the east. You have the Byzantines right in this area. Carolingians are pretty much controlling the majority of Europe. And then this area right through here is a lot of these things are what the Vikings were controlling. Remember the Danube, or the Donau, is a river that goes right through here. The Vikings, they knew how to sail and everything. They made their way to the Black Sea and a lot of these inner ocean seas, and they were the guys that became bodyguards for Byzantines as well as Muslims, for high-ranking people. And so, all these folks are coexisting at the same time and doing a lot of stuff in very close proximity to each other. Let's see. I wonder how long this guy is. Okay, this is about 10 minutes long. I don't really want to necessarily go through it. But this gives you an idea of the different ways, different areas that were settled by the Vikings, what they controlled. So this is, Scandinavia and Finland, right around this area. And you can see that there's inroads in here. The Black Sea and stuff like that is off screen down this way. But the reason why this is so important is that Vikings, more than anything else, they knew how to survive. They knew how to explore. They knew how to make use of resources that everybody else would see and decide, oh, I'm going to just starve. The Vikings knew how to deal with stuff. Do you guys know where we got the name of Bluetooth technology? Where that comes from?
Wasn't it the last name of some guy in the that's so vague. It was probably the last name of some guy from the Viking era.
Yes, you're absolutely right. His name was Harald Bluetooth. And what's really interesting is the way, this is how he writes his name. A vertical line with a cross and then the B basically right on it. So that you get this with lines right there and right there. And that is the Bluetooth technology symbol. What was so amazing about him is that he was a Denmark king, it says in 10th century, and he was able to get all the Viking settlements to agree on a leader. Yeah, there's a symbol for Bluetooth technology right there. And the reason he was able to do that was by convincing everybody, first, that they could make a lot more money and stay alive a lot longer if they got along with each other. That was one thing. Another thing was he made sure that everybody who came to the table was respected and felt that they had a voice in governance. So that's another thing. And a third thing was he created raised highways to make it easier to get goods and services and people all over the place. He was able to cut travel time by 2/3 in a lot of areas in Northern Europe. And then the fourth thing is he developed a systemized way of collecting people and communicating that was so rapid. It was unbelievable. It was startling. And there was some of the stories about him. There are the people that set up the Bluetooth technology in Denmark, or that named it after him. They conducted a number of tests using some of the stuff for communication that he developed, and they found that he could get a signal across the length of some of these entire countries in close to the same amount of time it would take to get a cell phone signal across the same distance. Yeah, he was absolutely amazing. But that kind of ingenuity, that became the hallmark for a lot of Vikings. That's how people knew about Vikings. That's what people knew about Vikings. And so, yeah, they did a lot of thuggery, of course. That's what most of us know about from the movies and stuff like that. But a lot of that was actually religious observance, believe it or not, because of their specific, because of different devotions offered to gods and those kinds of things. But what is really interesting, what is really cool about the Vikings is you could drop them in the middle of Nowheresville with absolutely no resources, and within a matter of a couple of weeks, they would be thriving because they knew how to survive. And that's what people remember. They adapted and they learned. So I do want to watch this. I want to look at some of this, but I want to watch this ship. And this is one of the primary reasons why the Vikings were so successful at traveling. Now let's see if I can, okay. Okay, this is about 7 minutes long. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we have time. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and watch this.
Now we get to the Scandinavian and
Okay, can you guys hear this and see the video?
Yes.
Okay.
wrong slide. Now we get to the Scandinavian invasion, the Vikings. Now, the Vikings were people from the Scandinavian countries, primarily from Norway, Sweden, a little bit in Finland, a little bit in Denmark. And the reason they're going to go out raiding is not so much to raid. That's what we tend to associate with them. But in fact, a lot of their missions are trade missions because their homelands are lousy agricultural areas. So they almost entirely rely on trade. Also, when you hear about the Normans, they are effectively Viking rather than being French. That's a little bit of a different story. So Viking is actually a verb. It's something that these people do. They would have seen themselves as Scandinavians. And they would raid and pillage basically every time they just couldn't get a good trade mission going. They would raid and pillage if they had no other form of sustenance. You don't want to go out raiding and pillaging or relying on it all the time because it is a very high-risk endeavor. And they're going to travel throughout Europe. We're going to see them come down as far as Constantinople. There are actually writings in Islam that tell us about Viking burials. That's where we find out about them. And we're finding out that from the Black Sea. So they're covering a
Okay, I'm going to pause this for a little bit, but I want you to see, look at all these rivers that connect all through here. You know, we have a sea here, we have another sea here, we have another sea here. There's these rivers. So the Viking doesn't have to go over land too much. They can actually go right in here, get into a river here, sail the river up, portage a bit, sail the river up, portage a bit, and get all the way to Turkey without having to go over to the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
considerable area. Of course, we have Eric the Red, who discovers Greenland. We have Leif Erikson in North America. We have the discovery of Iceland. They will travel all the way to Italy and elsewhere. And they aren't necessarily raiding all the time. As I said, a lot of these are trade missions, and then they raid when necessary. This pillaging would allow their society to continue. And their ships are what does it for them. These ships are remarkable vessels, great seagoing vessels with these large rectangular sails. And just having a ship isn't good enough. Of course, we're in the north where you don't have the sun for navigation for a considerable time of the year. So they have one other trick up their sleeve. They have something called the Viking Sunstone. It's actually calcite. And what it does is it actually polarizes the light so they can find the sun, find where the sun is in the sky and continue to navigate even in rough weather as long as it's daylight. And at night, they need to rely on being able to see the stars. This ability to navigate long distances sets them apart. And the Vikings will eventually disappear because all of those areas that they traded with and raided and pillaged, they would go there because they had resources. So the Vikings would integrate themselves into those societies. A great deal of the English population will be of Viking heritage, as well as most of northern France, parts of Italy, southern Italy, specifically areas around the Black Sea, etc. So they really don't suddenly disappear. They simply don't come back home. And it makes a lot of sense because why come home to a rocky, cold environment when there's good agricultural land to be had elsewhere? Or they move to Minnesota. So let's talk about the Oostburg ship. This is discovered near Oslo in 1904, and this is a Viking vessel carved out of oak. And in this case, it was likely ceremonial rather than being used for raiding. In fact, we believe that it's for a burial. And here we see another version of the Oostburg ship, or another image of it. The bow and stern are elaborately carved with interlace forms and wild beasts. And we also see grave goods. Here it is when it was buried as they're excavating it. The interesting thing is we find people and animals, which is not that remarkable in Viking society. Oftentimes they would poison people close to the person being buried, and they would be buried with this person. But we have one woman on the ship who's a good deal older than anyone else, and this likely indicates the burial of a queen or priestess, indicating a great equality in Viking society with women. So it's sometimes interesting which societies give women a fair element of equality and which do not. Now, from the ship, we have the animal head post. And this is wood carving mixed with metalwork. It's basically the spirit of the ship. And the importance here is that you tend to see a lot of superstition amongst sailors. The reason being, the weather on the seas can change for no apparent reason. You have rogue waves and other natural phenomena that are terrifying and completely unpredictable. So oftentimes they will attribute a spirit to the ship, or they're attributing elements of a god to the ship to find favor. But it all kind of boils back to superstition, and this post is not a massive thing. It wasn't meant to terrify people. It's actually quite small. It's measured in inches. When we look at it, you'll notice the Celtic knotwork, especially on the sides, stands out, and that indicates to us that there's not only material trade and looting and plundering in Ireland, but we also see cultural trade, cultural hybridization between the.
I think that is a really, really important element to pick out. There's cultural cross-pollination. Now, this is reminiscent. If we're looking at it, it does kind of remind me a little bit of some of the Islamic work that we looked at, some of the interlacing Islamic stuff. But there is a very strong and powerful difference that when you look at the Celtic work and you look at the Muslim work side by side, that you'll notice almost immediately if you know what you're looking for. Does anybody want to guess what that big difference is?
Could you repeat the last part?
It's sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Lindsay.
No, I was just saying that there is, even though this is reminiscent of some of
The
that
Vikings
Islamic,
and the Celts.
sorry, even though this is reminiscent of a lot of that Islamic work that we looked at, there's a big difference between the Celtic knotwork, that Scandinavian knotwork, and the Islamic design and patterning. And what I was asking is if anybody can pick it out.
In
What
the
the big,
Islamic artwork, they're not allowed to portray animals or people, and in the Norse knotwork, it's mostly animals and pagan stories.
I really like that. That isn't, and that is a lot of art historians are going to tell you that's absolutely right. But if you remember from last week, the Islamic artwork, or from earlier, the Islamic artwork, the animals and people are not to be portrayed generally inside the worship space. Outside of that, it's totally fine. But there is a little bit, and when you go to Egypt and you look at the Wahhabist work, the fantasy animal work looks very similar to this. But I like Zach. I like where you're going with that. It is not wrong in Islamic art to portray animals or people. It is just inappropriate to portray animals and people within the worship space, specifically towards the area where people are going to be facing Mecca. And but what Zach was talking about is, notice how the animal is built up with this knotwork. The biggest difference is that in Islamic patterning, it's going to be based on repeated geometry, and it's going to be specifically based on repeated geometry. Like Zach was saying, this knotwork is designed specifically around the portrayal of animals and things. So the geometry is going to be a lot more organic. It's not going to be a precise geometry. So, and I think that's when we look at them together, side by side, even though the lines are similar, you'll see that right away. And I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can show an image side by side. Let me see if I can find. Okay. All right, let's see if this. Okay, so I think this is probably pretty good side by side. Right in here, you see the knotwork goes around, and there is a certain logic to it, but it is based on pattern and following the line around, creating a design. It is there, you do have repeated patterns, but right here you have a very similar pattern that is also interlaced. But the biggest difference is that this is very much based primarily on geometry. And I think we can narrow it down to the Celtic design work is designed to fill an area for visual texture. And that is where it starts with. It starts with the area to be filled. And it seems like the Islamic work, the knotwork, it begins with the geometry and works up to fill the area. And I wonder if that's going to be, but other than that, they are very, very similar. Yeah, here's a really good example. There's that Islamic knotwork. And you look at that, and you look at something like this. I'm sorry. I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. There we go. So look at something like this. Look at this is a development of some Celtic knotwork. And then you compare that to the Islamic geometry. So there is a subtle difference, but I liked what Zach was talking about. Okay, let's finish this. Yeah. All right, excellent. So there's some this is a short thing as well. It would also be a good video to watch. I think it's only a couple minutes long.
If you're showing a video, we can't see it. We could still see the Celtic Islamic artwork.
Oh, okay. There. Now you can see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this video is also really good. I'm sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. I do want to show you 10 examples of Viking art. Oh, we are over. I'm sorry. Do you guys have a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so looking at this, I want everybody to look at this article specifically. How far back, 10 examples of Viking art you need to see, and definitely watch this. And this talks about knotwork and how to do the knotwork if anybody's interested in turning that into one of their projects, and quite a bit more about Vikings, and then some more information about that. But I want to go to this really quick. So this is a really good example of the boats or the ships. Gelling stones were kind of, if this was in Egypt, they'd be called stela, or in Central America, they'd be called stela. They're record-keeping stones. This is the kind of jewelry. Vikings were expert metal crafters, and one of the reasons why they crafted in metal so well is because this is an incredibly portable source of wealth. It's, wealth storage that you can carry anywhere. And they brought and adapted, brought from places that they visited and traded with and raided, and then also adapted other people's work into their own. The wood carvings, and you can see that kind of lacing, the interlacing and knotting. And this is where principally with animals in this one. And that was something else that Zach pointed out. A lot of that stuff that you see in the traditional Islamic stuff is going to be plant-based forms and not animal-based forms. And you see a lot of that knotwork here. Look at this metalwork with all the detail and texture in this. This is about 3.5 inches right across here to give you an idea of the scale. So a casket. Sometimes the boxes would be to carry important things, and sometimes they would be to carry people. Not always used as coffins, but sometimes that they would have something like this to hold a body, just like all the other cultures have sarcophagi. So just looking at some of these things. And here's another one of those ship heads, ship faces. So definitely check those things out as well. All right, so that's everything that I wanted to cover. I'm sorry we did go through that pretty quick. Does anybody have any questions or observations? Definitely check these videos out. I tried to get them down to about 2 or 3 minutes each. And definitely check out, and this is where it talks about Harald Bluetooth, like what Lindsay was talking about. But definitely check them out. We've already talked about Islamic art, Byzantine, and Carolingian. This is another group, another cultural group in the same area overlapping. So anybody have any final observations or questions?
No, I still have Pink Pony Girl stuck in my head, though.
I'm sorry about that. That's something that I want people to be aware of what's going on, because when we start talking about the Crusades, I want to show you what happens with the shift in music. It's pretty interesting as these different cultures interact. Not only does their art impact each other, but their music starts impacting, and the way that they tell stories impacts each other too, which I think is really fascinating.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Zach. And anybody else? Cassandra?
I don't have much. You showed one of the ships in that kind of list of like 10 important art things of like the Vikings. And
Right.
my previous discovery project was making one of those ships in
Okay,
like Blender.
cool.
So like seeing even just that image, I was like, I stared way too much at that specific image for a couple hours using it as a reference.
All right, excellent. Well, very good. All right, guys, thank you so much. I look forward to visiting with you again next week and weekend. Until then, be safe, be healthy, and don't get into any trouble that you can't get out of.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys.